At this time, I will call to order the in-person regular session meeting of the City of St. Louis Port Authority for its meeting scheduled for April 13, 2023 at 9 a.m. And we are at the stadium of St. Louis City soccer team. So let's do a roll call, please.
Commissioner Williams,
Present.
Commissioner Kay,
Present.
Commissioner Miller, President, Chair McBride.
Present. Let's take up the approval of minutes for the meeting held on March 9, 2023. Is there a motion to approve? So moved.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded, and we have a roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Williams,
Aye.
Commissioner Kay,
Aye.
Commissioner Miller, aye. Chair McBride.
Aye. Moving on to resolution 23 PT 10, authorizing the issuance of request for proposal for security services. Susan, can you walk us through that, please?
Yeah, as you all know, we have visiting cruise boats that come and park in front of the arch during the summer, and this year we have three companies: Viking, American Queen Voyages, and American Cruise Line. And we have overnight visits. Unfortunately, during some of those overnight visits, we have party goers, if you will, come down to the levee and have parties. And so we'd like to protect the cruise boats that are there overnight. So we would like to issue an RFP for security services just for those nights. I think there's 13 of them. And we would have an officer or two on duty from 7 o'clock at night to 7 o'clock the next morning. And they would patrol and protect the cruise boats and try to keep kind of order. The company that we had the last 2 years was comprised often police officers, so we have the same, we expect the same type of service. So that is the request before you.
Have there been any documented instances?
Yes, there was 2 years ago. There was a shooting, and the captain of the vessel that was moored there called it in. Police arrived and arrested, I think, 6 people. And then just yesterday, I got a report by the captain of one of the local cruise boats who saw a guy walking around the levee with an AR-15 type rifle. It is legal to do that, obviously, but we don't want to have any unfortunate incidents. So they usually, the visiting the local cruise boats have events, and then the people, when those events are over, then there's communication by text, I'm sure, and 50 people show up in stolen cars sometimes.
So that's what I was going to ask. If two security officers are even enough to do anything, if there are 50 people.
Well, usually they're revelers. They come down and they want to party and talk and drink, and there's nothing illegal about that either. We just don't want the situation to get out of hand. And sometimes there is shooting. Usually there isn't, but we would like to protect the cruise boats. It's also a public safety issue. So we work in tandem with the police department. By state, which is the Tom Sawyer, Becky Thatcher, they have in-house security people that are there during those events. So we try to get as many people involved from the security point as possible.
And then refresh my memory, Susan. Is this going to be the first year for Viking, or did they land a few ships? They landed a few boats last year.
Last year, they had a lot of trouble with their vessels, so they came once for provisioning, but then they came a second time and they had passengers. So at the time that they were there for provisioning, they had some of the crowd on the levee try to get on the Viking. And Viking security people pushed them off, and our security people resisted. So nothing happened, but we just don't want anything to get out.
Because everybody's excited.
Yeah.
Public safety, when these vessels are coming to these streets, it's not, they're not coming for the vessel. No, I know. Yeah, we just wondered if we know.
Oh, yeah, we have calendars. So all those cruise lines send me their schedules, and I put it on a collective calendar, which I then send out to the police, fire department, Coast Guard, everybody that we think was parking. So that's our internal knowledge.
There's a whole group that have to meet and, do, is it a federally approved docking that you have to, what do you have to do? What's the process whenever they do dock here?
The Coast Guard gives every vessel a number and a license, and you have to be registered with the Coast Guard. And so Roland, our port project manager, is the so-called individual with security responsibilities. He's a Coast Guard designated title, and he checks in with the Coast Guard and the captain of the vessel, you know, a few hours before he gets there, or a day or two, to make sure everything's copacetic. So the Coast Guard kind of keeps track of all that, and the level of security from the Coast Guard's point of view is level 1. It's a basic, emergency level. That's what you're asking.
More or less, yes. Yeah, I don't think there's any, I think we have to provide security. I just want to make sure we're providing enough. And things change on a levy where we need more than 2 officers, 2 security officers, then I would ask, assuming that is approved, I would ask that you keep us apprised of that. And if we need to pivot, that we do so and try to do so expeditiously. Because, you know, we've been trying to get Viking here for 10 years or more, and I'd like to keep them here.
Yeah.
Is it stipulated in the RFP, like for those company names on the RFP, to say this is what we think we need beyond 2, if they wanted to do that?
We have a provision to expand, and at the moment, we're looking at either 1 or 2 for the 7 p.m. to 1 a.m. So we have the option to expand. And unfortunately, when these events occur, sometimes there are other events, so a lot of these off-duty police officer companies have multiple clients. And so then it becomes a resource issue.
Okay, any other questions for, to the rest of the staff and commissioners? Hearing none, I entertain a motion to approve resolution 23 PT 10.
So moved.
Second.
Probably moved in second, may we have a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Williams,
Aye.
Commissioner Kay,
Aye.
Commissioner Miller. Aye. Chair McBride.
Motion passes and the resolution is approved. Moving on to resolution 23 PT 11, approve an execution of personal services contract with HDR Engineering.
Professional service.
Go ahead.
I thought it was personal.
Maybe. Never know. That's like Albert
When we came before you in February, at the time, we had about $1.4 million in state and ARPA funds towards the South Riverfront redevelopment project, which entails initially taking down the incinerator that's abandoned. Of that $1.4 million, half of it was state money that we had to spend by the middle of June. So that put us into kind of a phased approach, and so we asked for what we for $130,000, which would cover state money plus the ARPA funds for the professional engineering. Since then, the state has is allowing us. Another Port Authority went to the state and said we need money now, and so we engaged in a kind of a swap. So we are able to give the other Port Authorities some of our money now, which they can spend by the middle of June, and then next year, starting July 1st, they give us their money. So in effect, this extends the timing of our project into FY24, which is good because the phased approach is not as good as just a normal, let's go out and do the engineering and then go out for the demo for the incinerator. And so we've negotiated a normal contract with HDR, approximately $421,000. And we have, not only do we have the state and ARPA funds, the state called me yesterday or 2 days ago and said, we have another source of funding that you can use for this project, so that will increase our funding. I think we'll have another, it's going to be half of what we spent on the number 5 Clinton project for So that was about eight, so we'll have about 400,000 in additional funds from, that we can use to trigger another 400 in ARPA. So that adds another 800,000. So that's a very comfortable, spending range for not only the engineering, but taking the incinerator down. So the proposal before you is to rescind, the resolution 23 PT8, which was for the lesser amount of money for the engineer, and to, embark upon a normal contract with HDR, with the scope of services that you see in Exhibit A. And so basically what they're going to do is survey the site, look at its quality of the grounds, underground utilities, do a topographical study. Then we get into environmental testing. Nobody knows what's in the incinerator stacks or in the stacks are, there's a building and then there's kind of a horizontal connecting pipe, I guess, and then there's stacks. And we don't know what kind of environmental issues we'll encounter, but they'll tell us. So there's environmental assessment and testing, and then a cleanup plan, and then the engineer will do an abatement and plan for the incinerator and a demo plan for the incinerator. And then once those two scopes of work are underway, they'll do the construction or demolition in this case, monitoring. So that's the scope that you see attached. So are there any questions about it?
I think it's good just to get the vendor paid in one fell swoop, so I don't have an issue with that. I'm curious about the mechanics of lending our funds to, is it Port KC?
Uh-huh.
Do we need an agreement with Port KC and or the state?
The state handles that through the funding agreement. So we have funding agreements with the state. And so the state will revise our funding agreement and theirs. And then come July 1st, they'll have new funding agreements for FY24.
Are these funding agreements separate from the annual funding agreements from the state by which we would just get $20,000 for administrative costs and things like that?
We have three types of funding agreements. One's for admin, one's for construction, or two types, admin and construction.
So this is construction.
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
sorry, PE, that's.
Gotcha. So, okay, so there's no issue that there won't be, Jackie, listen to this, Jackie Barget, listen to this. There won't be an issue with funding for next year if we enter this agreement that the state won't say, well, that $400,000 isn't here,
Mhm.
City of St. Louis Port Authority.
No, the state manages all the funding that the state legislature gives to all the ports collectively. And so the state writes funding agreements, MoDOT, writes funding agreements with every port authority having to do with their particular project. So the state's managing it, and they are beholden to the Missouri Highway and Transportation Commission, which is overseeing all the flow of money. So we've done this in the past. That's never happened where we've received money and given it back to the other port, and we've also given money to other ports.
All right. Jackie, you've got a preview of a question I'm gonna ask you. Any questions for Susan on this? I mean, it makes sense. Just want everybody to act responsibly. The other two parties act responsibly.
Yeah.
Right. Any questions for Susan? And entertain a motion to approve resolution 23 PT11.
So moved.
Probably moved in second, and we have a roll call vote.
Commissioner Williams,
Aye.
Commissioner Kay,
Aye.
Commissioner Miller, aye. Chairman Bryant.
Aye. And the motion passes and the resolution is approved. All right. Okay, moving on to resolution 23 PT12, Charlie Hahn, the SVP Chief Financial Officer. What are these initials? Senior Vice President. That's right, well, I was one of the presidents.
Yeah, no,
I thought we were going, I think, SOC, I was going to Of course you are, Charlie.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, this resolution approves the annual budget, which we do every year prior to the start of the ensuing fiscal year, which will be FY '24, July 1, 23 through June 30th, 24. It's comprised of the Port Development Fund budget, the Improved Work budget, and the municipal terminal budget. The Port Development budget, it captures the multitude of leases. I think there's between 35 and 40 leases that we monitor on behalf of the city. The city leases, the Port Authority by ordinance receives the proceeds from those leases, and the Port Authority then spends it in accordance with the budget that I'm going to talk to you about a little bit here. So if you turn to the Port Development budget, shows 3 columns. The current year budget of 2023. The center column is a projected what we think might be the June 30th results for FY23, and then the third column is the budget we're asking for your consideration today for FY24. Regarding the Port District leases, the current year budget is $1,850,000. We're projecting $1,970,000, and the budget for 24 is $2,001,000. And the step up is again as leases reach milestones, we renegotiate the rates to make sure they're in accordance with what we brought you up to speed on, and just the overview. The current market rates for those leases far exceeds the guidelines established by the Port Ordinance, which I think is approaching $20, but we're close to 60 or maybe 65 with our.
We're at 65. Yes.
Good. And Charlie, the leases include, SCF posting time?
SCF is the large lease I'll talk about later. It's not part of the Dutch Port Terminal. But SCF does have, I think, 4 leases that are in this budget at different locations. 3 or 4.
Yeah, 4.
Okay. The other revenue item is a carryover from the projected 23 budget, which is $359,000. That's the bottom line of the center column that is brought up as used in the FY24 for a total of $2,459,000. The under expense, we have city internal services, which we received invoices from the city towards the end of the year, in early June. We're projecting $15,000, but we'll budget $25,000 for the FY24. Our professional service line is legislative consultants in Jefferson City and Washington, D.C. At $185,000. The $300,000, the next line for water cleaning is transferred to the street department by the comptroller's office for their work on the mainly in the cleaning of the debris that washes up on the levee. Special purposes, $50,000, contingency $200,000, and then the port's contribution to SLDC, current year $650,000. We're going to ask you to approve $850,000. This has been as high as $1.4, $1.5 million in times past when we received proceeds from the President Casino. We're trying to increase it bit by bit till we get to somewhere around that level, and, but we'll take it one step at a time. And SLDC, of course, is expanding its functionality, so to speak. We're beefing up employees. Not all those employees, if they're working on, say, an ARPA project, we may not be eligible for 100%, maybe 80, 70%, so we got to fill in that gap. So this would help fill in that gap, so to speak. The 375 right below that line item goes to pay the city for the debt service on the improvements to the second floor that we when we moved into the 1520 location, the city had to build out all that space, design and construction, and then issued bonds to do that work, and this is the repayment of this bond. The projected total expense is $1,985,000. The net income, I'm looking at column 3, we're projecting at $474,000. This is a request to transfer $200,000 to the city terminal fund, which this has worked both ways in the past. City terminal fund has helped fund this budget. Now, with that excess, what we would like to do is do some prepayments on the debt that we borrowed to match a federal grant 7 years ago, I think it was, when we borrowed that money to build a new north dock and piece in between the north and the south a little section, so we have a contiguous dock. It was a close to $20 million project, and we had to pay 20%. We borrowed that entire 20%, and it still has an outstanding balance of a little over $2 million. So this would prepay that to that degree.
What's the interest rate on that?
The interest rate on that, I think, is 4%. It's a decent rate. I mean, it was. We did refinance that at one time, but
We borrowed that in 2012 or 13, so it should conclude here in the next few years, right?
no, it's
15-year note, I think.
it is a 15-year note. Yes. Yeah. Our current payment on it is roughly $80,000, $60,000 principal, at $80,000 a quarter, so $60,000 principal and $20,000 in interest. I wish I had an exact number for
No,
that.
that's
Page 2 of your packet is the budget for the improved WARF account. The improved WARF account is the money we collect from parking on the levee when the water permits. And we're projecting $110,000 in 2023. That's what our budget is in 2024. I can see with increased arch attendance that may go up. If it does, we will factor that into next year or the year after FY25. I have 125 for maintenance, repair, and other in that area. That might involve security or might involve cobblestone repair. There's some cobblestones that are coming loose. Might involve
Mooring rings.
the mooring rings that hold the boats in. And anyway, that's nothing specific, but that's what it's set aside for. And then the on the bottom half of that page is the terminal account that we talked about, where the city has its primary dock, and the current operator is SCF. Their lease income this year is $373. There's a modest increase according to their lease, so we're budgeting $377 next year. In addition to that, we share in the throughput, so by tonnage, if they we get a percent of every
25 cents a ton.
25 cents a ton. Yeah. We're projecting 200 this year. We got 200 in the budget for next year. The first item was a rollover from this year of $449,000. Again, this by ordinance is supposed to be used in the geography of the municipal terminal. And we have some projects identified, a paving project right now that there's always room for additional paving. There's warehouses on the property. There's infrastructure leading to the property. There's a lot of things we can use this for. We just are waiting for the right time and the right moment to do that. So our lease, as you know, with SCF, calls for them to do, it's almost like a triple net lease, but there are things they need help on, which only improves our property as we move forward. But when we do obtain federal state grants, they supply the match, and they've been faithful to that commitment.
Oh, they're required to in the lease.
Yes.
Okay, so, which is very helpful because not only are they there to pay it, but it elevates the competitiveness of our grant application. That's worked well. And they also pay us a royalty on the fleet. So they have a bunch of large parking lots, and they pay us 7% of that income that they get.
And Charlie, does this, was it the $400,000 we just addressed in the previous resolution, is that factored into here somehow? The change in your calculation?
That money is supposed to be paid, we don't have a look, on the trash refuse site.
Mm-hmm.
The match, is,
We don't need a match. With the state money can match ARPA. We don't have to match the state money. State money that we get matches ARPA, but we don't have to match.
so we'll do the dispersing after receiving those respective funds.
Any questions for Charlie?
What was the actual on levy parking in the most recent year, so 22? Yeah.
In 22, I think it was around 70-some thousand.
Okay. I was just reading, I was curious if the ARC said levy parking, and it's not great. All that's missing here is the skull and crossbones. They say, we don't operate it. They have preferred parking at Stadium Garage East, a huge couple paragraphs about that. They say do not use GPS navigation to reach the gateway, to reach the wharf because of, recent changes and so forth. So there's a lot of don't park on the levee kind of vibe, I guess, from this. I don't know if they'd be, amenable to maybe changing some of that language just to be a better partner.
Okay. Good thought. Some of their staff are told parks there on the levee.
I'm sure it's just,
Yeah.
frankly, other than a few stairs, it's pretty close,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
As opposed to, even though with the new entrance, which is close to the hotel. Anyway, it has a really don't do this vibe. And if you're from Kentucky or Tennessee or Illinois, the places that we tend to attract arch visitors, you would probably avoid it. So it seemed like we could move that needle from 70,000 to our goal, which is 110, with just a little bit more massaging.
And have we, I know with that budget, there was questions about the parking rate itself. Has that been addressed and evaluated?
Kind of rely on the operator to set those rates, what they share in the revenue.
That was perfect.
I think,
We voted on that a few years ago.
What, increase the bar?
By a little bit.
we did increase it. I'm not sure what the current rate is. It might be $7 an hour or something like
I
that.
think it's a,
Compared to parking style, what, do we know what their rate is?
On,
City Reggie, but it's about
I
prepaid.
don't think it's by the hour, I think it's just.
Oh, it's
flat.
prepaid, like, so, okay.
We're doing a good job of getting our revenues up on leases, $9 for the first 5 hours. So, pretty close. So, yeah, let's, not forget about parking revenues as well.
Well, if I could add, we've also started charging for those cruise boats that come in to visitors. They used to be able to do that for free, so we're now charging $1 a head. So when they get a permit from us for the summer, from the police department, there's a fee associated with that based on their maximum occupancy. So if they're allowed 300 passengers, they pay us $300 a visit. I mean, it's a modest amount, like 12,000, I think, last year. But everybody's building more boats, so hopefully that will,
Couldn't the cost for security be billed to them?
that's one of the reasons we started charging $1 a head.
Okay,
We do some other things for them, like helping them get potable water, that kind of stuff.
okay.
So, yeah, that's one of the reasons for that.
Yes. Whatever spills over, we'll use for the security.
Okay.
Any other questions? For sure. If there are none, I entertain a motion to approve, resolution 23 PT 12.
So moved.
For a second. Howell, second. There, roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Williams,
Aye.
Commissioner Kay,
Aye.
Commissioner Miller, aye. Chair McBride.
Aye. Motion passes and, budget is approved. I know we have our guests, but, first, for anything, on the director's report.
Yes, thank you, commissioners, for joining us today at Soccer Stadium. I did want to take a moment, as Charlie mentioned, the modest increase in some of our personnel costs. As we've been moving forward our economic justice action plan, we've restructured the organization to be really focused on those three pillars of economic empowerment, equitable and inclusive development, and neighborhood transformation. And so the work that you've seen by Stacy Fowler with the Northside Economic Empowerment Center, the work of providing technical assistance to small and minority-owned businesses, and really devising a new workforce development strategy for the city is all under Stacy Fowler's purview. And then the neighborhood transformation pillar is LRA, Land Utilization Authority, as well as our new neighborhood managers. And so they've been focused on engaging communities, ensuring that they have a voice in economic development activity that's happening within their neighborhoods, and then also working on reactivating sites in the vision in which the neighbors see them. And so when we go out to market for RFPs, or as we have LRA meetings, it's really about the vision that the neighborhood has for those development projects, but also ensuring that they're financially feasible. So we're more engaged in that process. I guess the things most pertinent to the Port Authority is the work that Rob is leading under the equitable and inclusive development pillar, really focused on the commercial corridors, site assembly, environmental justice, as well as ensuring that our court continues to operate in an effective and efficient manner. And so we've made a couple organizational shifts and promotions. And so I'll pass it over to Rob to really share his vision for his team around equitable and inclusive development.
Yeah, so one of the things that you may have heard about, and I don't know how much has been addressed actually at the Port Authority, but the incentive reform that we've undertaken with Baker Tilly as our consultant is, I think it's going to be significant and actually somewhat cutting edge as far as the country goes. We created a community benefit scorecard where not only do we look at the benefits overall fiscally to the city, but we're looking at what does it mean to the neighborhoods that they land in, what does it mean in terms of promoting equitable, inclusive opportunities for all. And so that's still kind of being tweaked. We're pretty close. We're going to have another meeting on Friday. We think there's maybe a few little things that we didn't quite include that we want to take a look at. So we want to make sure that, you know, as stewards of the city's monies, that we are supporting projects that create quality jobs and that create a quality space in where those projects are completed. Neil mentioned the Port Authority. You guys are all very familiar with what we're doing there. Major projects has always been that default department that gets whatever Neil wants us to do, notice before him. But we have focused largely on a lot of public infrastructure. All of these streets you see around this stadium and the NGA were largely paid for by NGA bond proceeds that come from the earnings taxes and the state withholding taxes from the employees and contract employees that work at the NGA. That's provided about $145 million worth of public infrastructure in downtown West and near North St. Louis. So some significant work. You can see it, you know, even just reconfiguring the interchange out here allowed those two long spaghetti ramps that were in the valley, if you remember, that came out at Chestnut and Pine, freed up 30-some acres where we now have a beautiful soccer stadium and complex. So all of this is piggybacked on the result of retaining the NGA and relocating them to North St. Louis. So it's leading to a lot of development, as you've all read about and can see around you. And then one of the things that we're going to do going forward is, one of the problems we have is being able to offer sites for companies that want to locate in St. Louis. We don't have many 5-acre sites. We have one 17-acre site that we've had, you know, set vacant now for 15 years. We're trying to attract major retail development in that area and struggle to do so at this point. But one of the things that ARPA funding has been provided to us for is to do proactive land assemblage and redevelopment. So we will target certain properties that we think that we can acquire and make improvements to, whether it's demolition, environmental remediation, utility, either removal or additions, and proactively assemble sites that we can attract employers to St. Louis and have sites that we can be competitive with in the region. It's easy to go way out of the county and find a lot of land, but within St. Louis, everything's already been built on at least once, if not many times. And so a lot of sites sit vacant for years because of the cost of maintaining them, absentee landowners. We want to do some land assemblage around creating job opportunities, and we've identified a number of properties that we're focused on. And to that end, Peter Phillips is on he doesn't have a webcam. Hopefully we can squeeze $20 out of Charlie and get one for him and his laptop. But Peter Phillips has been promoted to Vice President of Land Assemblies and Redevelopment effective this week. So I don't know, Peter, you want to say a few words?
Sure. Good morning, commissioners. Peter Phillips again. I'm excited to be promoted to this position of Vice President of Land Assemblage, and I'm excited for the work that we get to do. My previous experience here at SLDC has been largely around the environmental brownfield program, doing the assessments and helping businesses, redevelopers, redevelop properties through environmental abatement. We have a loan program specifically for environmental remediation, and we've done a lot of assessments around the city, but I see this as a great opportunity to really expand on that work and do a little bit more proactive activity in terms of finding sites, purchasing them, getting all the pre-development work, and making them shovel ready for redevelopments in the city, and also making larger redevelopment sites so we can attract different types of redevelopments in different areas of the city that we'd like to see. So I'm excited about it. I hope that we can see great things come out of this funding and this program, and I look forward to working with you guys in any capacity that I might have moving forward. And I'm not sure exactly how much we'll be dealing with the Port Authority exactly, but if we do, I look forward to it. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And I will say that, the North Riverfront was the first assignment I had when I came here to St. Louis, and, a little bit scary driving through it when you see, all of the vacancy and all of the buildings that have been closed up, boarded up. Many are still being used and you don't know that they're being used. A lot of times it's just for storage. But the port definitely has a lot of opportunities for identifying those underutilized properties where the, business is closed, it's not marketable, it's, got a derelict building that would cost too much money to renovate to put back into use. So we're definitely going to be taking a look at port properties and making sure that we at least understand whether the properties are being used or not being used. And sometimes you can't tell that just by driving by. So we've got a great project happening in Gateway South, potentially up to a $1.2 billion project that you've all heard about and approved moving forward. And there's still weekly meetings on that project. So I'd like to get the North Riverfront going as well. We've had some communication about that over the years, and still a lot of opportunity there. So a lot of Peter's work will be, trying to understand what's going on in our port district and trying to increase the opportunities for jobs and commerce within that, within those boundaries.
Thanks, Rob. I just wanted to make sure that this board is well versed on, the strategy and the plan, and we're putting the economic justice action plan in work, putting financial and human resources behind it. And for every one of those actions, we have people that are committed to driving that work forward. So I just wanted to give that quick update to the commission.
Thank you, Mr. Richardson. Yeah, the Port Authority has always been an economic engine for the SLDC, bringing in the revenue so that it can engage in the projects. And that's one of the things that we're doing even better now with Susan, getting our revenues up, and we appreciate your attention to that. It makes a difference, and it's not just theoretical, it makes a difference in what we can do, both with the port and with the SWC at large. All right, so there's nothing else on that. We have our audience from both Jones Walker and Jackie Barget. So I'll let you figure out among yourselves who wishes to go first.
I'm gonna have to leave, I've got a.
Understood. We have justice needs to be meted out.
On time. No, I'm sorry to miss the rest of the meeting and the tour, but we're called. That's it, yeah.
I was just gonna say, Chris, if you want to go ahead and go first, you can.
I'm
Yeah.
happy to go first. Good morning, everyone. I'm Chris Johnson with Jones Walker in Washington. Nice to be with you all again virtually. Look forward maybe to coming and meeting with you all in person when the opportunity arises. So we've had a very busy couple of months. Susan has been in Washington twice. We met at length with the key officials at the United States Maritime Administration on the Port Infrastructure Development Program that they manage. The Maritime Administration is the maritime promotional agency within the Department of Transportation in Washington, and they administer this grant program, which is the primary federal program that provides funding for port infrastructure and related work at ports. In the infrastructure bill, the Maritime Administration received over $2 billion in funds for the Port Infrastructure Development Program. which they are authorized to disperse over a 5-year period. So Susan and I met at length with the folks administering that program to fully understand what the eligibility requirements are, what types of projects at the Port of St. Louis might qualify for that funding. And so we suspect that we will hone in on the project or projects that the port will pursue, and we will keep you all posted on that. Secondly, we have been focused with Susan on property that the Coast Guard owns along the river within the St. Louis Port jurisdiction on East Iron. And this Coast Guard property has been declared for the last 2 decades as surplus property that the Coast Guard has no use for. There's no buildings on the property any longer. And Susan and her team have worked for years to try to get our friends at the Coast Guard to put it up for sale or to somehow get it into maritime commerce. And for whatever reason, the Coast Guard has been very slow to move on that. So on Susan's last visit to Washington, we went to see the key Republican and Democratic staff of the House Coast Guard Subcommittee, and which is under the House Transportation Committee. They put out regularly a bill that is known as the Coast Guard Authorization Bill that handles and addresses all things related to the Coast Guard. And periodically they include in those bills language to convey certain surplus property of the Coast Guard around the country. And so we have initiated discussions with that committee to see whether we might be able to get them to include language in the upcoming Coast Guard authorization bill, which we believe will move through the House of Representatives this year. But anyhow, we're working to get them to include language that would convey this property to the port. That will require a lot of things, one of which is, of course, the support of Congresswoman Cori Bush, in whose district this property sits. And we are in the process of working on that and getting with the Congresswoman and her staff. We'll obviously, if we are successful in the House, we'll obviously have to work similarly in the Senate on this. So we're at the early stages of it, but wanted to let you all know that that is underway. And then finally, the third item that we've been focused on is that, as Susan has mentioned before, FEMA regularly awards funding for port security grants for ports around the country. FEMA has announced that they have $100 million available for ports nationwide this year for port security grants. We're working to put together a grant application, and the deadline for submitting that this year is May 18th. So those are the main items that we've been working on. Susan, please add anything that you would like, and of course, I'd be glad to take any questions.
Don't have anything to add. You've got me running too much as it is.
Thank you, Chris. Are there any questions for Chris from the commissioners? It appears none. Thank you for a thorough report. We appreciate it.
Sure, thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'll just start with saying we have 4 weeks after today left within the Missouri legislature. So it is, the end is in sight for those of us that have to be down here for it. But I do just want to say, Susan came up and spent the entire day walking around with me. Susan, I don't know, it was last month sometime, but That was extremely helpful. I will say both the appropriations chair and his staff stop me almost every single day and ask how you're doing and how the St. Louis Port Authority is doing. So that was very, very worth your time, although I'm sure you were a little annoyed with how much I had you running around, but it was good to finally see you in person and do that. That was great. And I also a couple weeks ago, Commissioner Mason was up here and I had the opportunity to meet her in person and introduce her to a couple people and on port issues too, which was great. She was up here for something else, but just to dive into everything, obviously 4 weeks left. So the budget has gone through the House. It is over in the Senate, waiting for the Senate Appropriations Committee to start work on that. As was mentioned before, I think Susan and Chairman McBride, you were talking about, there are two main funding line items that are put in the state budget every year, one for administration, one for CI or construction programs. We have right now, I think it's $800,000 that's in the administration line item and $11.6 million that's in the construction line item. From my conversations with the appropriations chair, he is not intending to reduce that at all on the Senate side, but he will start work on that on Monday. So we will keep a very, very close eye on that. I think you all remember last year as well. Obviously, we had the $25 million in ARPA funding that was appropriated to ports. That funding will continue to be reappropriated for the next couple years. I think it has to be expended by December of 2026. So that funding has to be reappropriated every year, the way that our budget cycle works. So that is also included in the budget this year. And then if you recall, the Jefferson County Port Authority and the New Madrid Port Authority also kind of went off. I will use the word rogue, but went off on their own and secured some appropriations from the state, and those are also included in the budget as well. So we will keep an eye on that. I've been trying to see if we can bump that number up a little bit. Obviously, that's always the hope. But there's quite a bit of debate around all of the budget bills right now in the House. One of the members offered and adopted some language into every single budget bill regarding DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, pretty much saying that under no circumstances will any public entity be receiving state funding if they incorporate or use any type of diversity, equity, and inclusion. The governor has come out in aggressive opposition to it. The Senate Appropriations Chair has said he will be removing all of that language, but it is going to turn into a pretty big battle between the House and the Senate on how they take that out and what that means for a lot of the budget line items that are in there. Quite frankly, it's pretty embarrassing that is going on. It's putting a lot of state funding in jeopardy, but I think everyone's intention is to remove the language and continue to move forward and hope that doesn't happen. But there is a lot of support in the House that's getting brought up for it. Moving on to better news, there are a couple bills that were introduced this year that would create a waterway and port trust fund that both MoDOT and the Missouri Port Authority Association have been pushing, that would create a fund for some of these line items like we talked about earlier, that would essentially just give another cushion year for those funds to be expended in case of, I think Susan talks about it all the time. It's a little hard sometime to get a construction project or something started with weather when the water's raising or lowering. So those bills are moving through the process. I think there still is a little debate and confusion, not confusion necessarily, but about how that should be set up and how it should be operated between MoDOT and some other folks in the building. The bill is in the Senate, is sitting on the perfection calendar and could be brought up next week for debate. But I will keep you all posted as that moves through. But if I were a betting person with 4 weeks left, that is a very short amount of time to get the bill passed. So I don't think it is going to pass this year, but and then I know I've updated you guys on a couple of things. I know you were talking about security, so just wanted to give you a quick update on some of the crime legislation that has been introduced. I think there will be some debates next week on both the legislation that would allow the governor to appoint a special prosecutor, which has been specifically targeted at St. Louis. And along with that debate, there will be an amendment that's offered, and they will also have the conversation about the state taking over the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department. Both Senator Carla May and Senator Steve Roberts are heavily opposed to those bills. There are negotiations going on about the special prosecutor language, and if there is some kind of middle ground that would have that would maybe provide some real gun reform that would go along with that. But as of right now, I think Senator May and Senator Robert are planning on standing up and filibustering those issues next week. I will keep you guys posted on that as well, and make sure to include that in your reports. And then someone had mentioned the earnings tax earlier, so I will just say, ever since COVID, there has been a very big push from what I call the collar counties outside of the city of St. Louis to either repeal our earnings tax in St. Louis or prevent any type of remote workers from having to pay into the earnings tax, or expanding the vote on who votes on the earnings tax to those collar counties. There has been a very big push again this year on it. But again, Senator May and Senator Roberts have successfully stopped that the past couple of years, just based on the massive amount of revenue hit that would be for the city. That is really all. I have a few other things, but I don't know if you all have any questions about anything crazy going on in Jeff City or not.
We just read the paper and wonder, but any specific questions for Ms. Brzee?
If I could add, she was talking about the 25 million that came to the ports collectively from ARPA, and the 11 point whatever it was million. Those funds come to all the ports in the Missouri Port Authority Association, and then we divvy it up amongst ourselves. So it's kind of an internal friendly competition as well.
Okay. Very good. Well, thank you much.
The only thing I will add, if you all read anything in the paper and have any questions, do not hesitate to reach out. I'm sure in the next 4 weeks, you're going to see a lot of articles about a lot of crazy things. So do not hesitate to ask if you have any questions.
Very good. Thank you. And thank you, Chris, as well. Let's see, any questions for the commissioners, just to the staff and for general items? Open agenda. Hearing none. Our next meeting is May 11th. At this time, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Moved and seconded. We are adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you.